8 each? 16 minutes in total?
I'll take 6.
You'll take 6.
I'll probably only take about 3 or 4
Ah,
because no point in
bit.
repeating a whole lot of stuff that has been said. But one thing that is worth repetition is that this is something extraordinary, that this bill is actually coming before the House, and it's extraordinary and wonderful to see all these people here with an extraordinary event of an interpreter being here to facilitate them to join the debate. I have to admit a huge amount of ignorance on the subject before I read the bill. Not entire ignorance, but a huge amount of ignorance. And sitting here tonight, reading the bill and sitting here tonight makes me think that in actual fact we are all deaf in this society, and what we're deaf to is the needs of the people with deafness. And clearly we've been deaf since the foundation of the state to the needs of those who cannot hear. Because we wouldn't be sitting here in 2016 having been at a point in 2011 when a commitment to recognise Irish Sign Language and to resource Irish Sign Language was given in the programme for government, and 5 years later we're now talking about it. And all credit is due to the previous deputies and senators who were mentioned, including all the members of the Justice Committee. It reminded me, sitting here, of there was a comedy sketch years ago called Not the 9 o'clock News, and it was very good at throwing a light back on ourselves for the sort of obviously stupid and irresponsible and hypocritical things we do in society. And they had this sketch where a guy had invented a big light that went like this, on and off like this, for deaf people to hear the phone ringing, so that they'd know the phone was ringing. And the light goes on and off, he's testing out his experiment, the deaf person picks up the phone and can't hear what's happening at the other end. But a fortune was spent on designing this light. Now, it's ironic and it was intended to be funny, but it was throwing a light back at society on our own hypocrisy and our own inadequacies, and that's what, in a way, reminds me of the fact that we're here today discussing it all these years later. There is something, though, that I do want to specifically mention in relation to services for deaf people, and that is the very admirable points in the bill about resourcing classes for parents, siblings, grandparents, other persons who may be in local parentis of a guardian or a child, providing hours and hours of academic provision in secondary, primary and secondary and third level schools, etc. There's no point in me repeating everything. But just to say, a couple of months ago, I was representing a family in Ballyfermot, and I mean, these people are poor as church mice, and they have several family members who suffer with different disabilities. One sister resides in a school for deaf people in Derry because this state is not able to look after her needs, and the family go to visit her every week. I wrote to the Minister and I asked, could we get training for one member of that family in the Irish Sign Language so that they can communicate with their sister? And I got a one-liner back. The short answer, Brid, is no. They can't afford the training. They need the training, but the short answer back was no. Here is a link to the Irish Deaf Society. So all of these very admirable and very important measures that are in this bill, we have to ensure that they are resourced, that they're not just aspirational. Because quick as lightning, when austerity hit us in the last recession, minister after minister cut the funding to disability, and those of us who are on the opposition will remember being outside the Taoiseach's office and sleeping overnight in some cases with people with disability to help them retain the funding. And quick as lightning, this is an area that could be neglected in terms of resourcing and funding. So I think that's really important, and that people like the Cummins family in Ballyfermot are not disregarded and dumped like that, that training for siblings, children, parents, grandparents, whomever, is resourced by the state, and that poor people are not expected to pay for it.